You're joining me here at the Verwood Heathlands Heritage Centre, and I'm in one of the last buildings that is connected to the Verwood Potteries. This is one of the old drying sheds. It's now part of the museum. With me today, I'll be talking to Alan and Chris, and they'll be telling us about their memories of Verwood and the Potteries.
My name is Alan George Sims, Grumpy, my nickname. Born in Boscombe Hospital, but brought back to Verwood in 1942. My link with the Potteries is my great uncle Meshach was seen as the last master potter at Verwood Pottery.
My name's Chris Brewer. I grew up in Verwood, but I've now moved away. I haven't really got any link family-wise with the pottery, but my interest started when we were younger. We used to ride a lot of bikes, and we'd be digging jumps and always come across little shards of pottery. And there was a great rumour when we were kids that one particular area there'd been a big explosion in the kiln had exploded or something. And but we never really, that was as far as it went. But then as I got older, I thought, you know what, Verwood, it's got some interesting facts about it and some very interesting history. And now, I collect all the books and watch and find out as much as I can about the place.
This building there, when we used to finish school, if we had a disagreement, we used to come round the back in the yard and sort it out there, fisticuffs.
I think what I really like about Verwood and the pottery is how, to the bitter end, when it closed in the 50s, they still probably sat right here, used traditional techniques. It never changed with any industrial revolution. It was still all, the clay was trodden by foot, and the wheel was still turned by hand by one of the apprentices. And I just think that's amazing that whilst the whole world was changing, the potteries just stayed the same. There was no reason and no need for it to change at all in the way that they produce pots. And I think that's, I don't know, it's a lovely thing I sort of hold on to, really.
My early memories of Verwood, living with me granddad down Sandy Lane, Cobb Cottage that they built, the Simses built, the brothers, I think it was three brothers, they built the three cottages. Uncle Job's, Uncle Meshach, the potter that was there, and my granddad John, they built their own Cobb cottages down, they raised them themselves. Living down there was no running water, it was well waters. He used to sink, there was another job that he used to do was put wells in, dig the wells. There was no electricity, so it was the old oil lamps, the old thunderbox down the garden. So you'd have to go out at night and use a bit of newspaper.
So I was born in 1987 and brought up here in Verwood. My early memories of Verwood, in fact, one is in this very room, which used to be a hardware shop when I was a kid. And there were lots of tiny places, shops and newsagents, all ran by families that have been there for probably 100 years or more. But with the birth of the supermarket in the mid-80s, I think it was, these little businesses really started to decline as people use a supermarket, which is a story seen all over Britain. But I remember as a kid going round with my mum to all the little shops, and she knew everyone. I think everyone knew each other in Verwood when I was younger. And I just think with the amount of houses that are being built here now, there's without the infrastructure, it's the industry's gone mostly. There's still a fence maker down the road, and I think he still produces things in a very traditional way. But beyond that, it's all gone, really. There was a sawmill that we went on a school trip to once near Julian's Common. I don't know what year that would have been, but we were the last school trip to visit before it was closed down and built upon. And I think, interestingly, that sawmill, the offcuts from that sawmill used to be used to fire the kilns for the pottery. So it's all these little things have just sort of disappeared, through time. And I feel very sort of nostalgic about it, really. And it's always nice to come back and go up the forest or come and visit this museum. But it's reading the history books, you can see how it sort of disappeared. People are leaving, and it's a shame, really, but we must go forward, I suppose.
When I moved from my granddad's up to Coronation Road or Avenue, what do they call it, we actually lived in Cooper's Lane, so they renamed the house up there, and on the end of it was the hurdle maker in one of the books. Can't remember his name at the moment, but he was hurdle making there. He used to make the Bism brooms and cider. Now, if I give you a little drop of cider, don't go home and tell your mum.
There wasn't any Verwood pottery around, really, when I was young. As I said, I didn't really ever know about it until we started finding bits down the local bike jumps.
Well, the story has it that one of the Crusaders came back and they reckoned he was useless at everything else, and they gave it to him, and he owned most of the land from what I can make out from Cranbourne. It's to do with Cranbourne Manor and all that, right the way down through, well on down, in the early books, where you're going back there, 14th, 15th century, I expect. And word has it that in one of the books, it had Verwood, no good for anything else, but give it to him just for his hunting and shooting.
This industry and the landscapes really inspired, all my paintings are just of this area, and Badbury Rings and hill forts and things like that. So it has really inspired the way I think and look at everything, really. It's lovely.
Well, I think it just phased out more so when the likes of Poole Pottery opened up, and Wareham was doing the ball clay, and they were, and the bone clay. A lot of it was being shipped down on the railways and that. I think the railways had a bigger influence on it, because the local pottery here, Verwood, Pan's brewer, as they called him, peddler or whatever you like to call him, haulier it would be now, was taking pots to Salisbury, Winchester. There's stories on him going right up to London, and further afield than that.
So this is my Verwood jug. It's by the one piece of Verwood pottery that I own. What actually is quite nice about bringing this here, I don't know if this was made here, but there's a good chance it was, on the wheel, which would have just been here. And I had it with me going through train stations this morning, and it's come back home, It's quite nice in a funny way. And I treasure this. Very beautiful Verwood pot with lovely markings from the kiln where it was fired up against other pots.
These are the clay pits at Holt Heath, and they're dotted throughout this whole area, and in fact all over East Dorset. These clay pits enabled people, local people, to dig out the clay and start up a whole industry working from home.
Well, the pottery industry began, I think, many, many years ago, probably way back before we even know. But the earliest indications we've found is from the Roman times. We found evidence that the yellow clay of the Verwood area was used to make pots that were sold in Winchester. So it goes back a long way. The soil is very shallow and it is easily eroded, and any of the good land was taken by the rich people, but the clay, underlying clay sand, was perfect for making pots, and later it developed a brick industry as well. Predominantly the pots that were being made were the ones that everyday people needed in their kitchen, so they were sort of the hard-wearing earthenware pots that you'd use for cooking, storing food and many other uses. These pots were sold all over the country. In fact, we've seen them as far as in Europe as well. But predominantly people, hawkers and journeymen would buy a cart full of pots and then travel around, and we've got lots of evidence of that happening. Verwood Potteries operated in small sort of family units really at the beginning stages. It was families working together and pooling their industry and resources. And these developed into commercial potteries that were owned by a number of families. It was a varied and mixed economy system, and people would often work in exchange for food as well, and property, somewhere to rent. And the whole thing was centred around this clay, because they even made their buildings from it. I think the height of Verwood Potteries was at the beginning of the railways, when people were able to move even larger amounts in greater numbers around the country. And it carried on growing as the railways grew and developed as well. And there were a number of potteries all around Verwood, out to Alderholt and stretching up to Cranbourne as well. So that was probably the height around the end of the 19th century, was just about maximum, I think. And then it began declining. The decline came when it was easier to build straightforward factories, as they did in Staffordshire, where they could even make these pots cheaper than they were being made here. After the First World War, things had changed for everybody, and so a lot of people didn't want to go back into sort of subsistence living, and there wasn't a lot of jobs anyway, but they looking to develop industrial type employment. And I think that's really when it started to decline forever, up until the 1950s, when the last pottery at the crossroads in Verwood was closed down. The clay that they were using in pool pottery was of a finer china type clay, ball clay it was called, and that could produce very delicate pots and teapots and china, plates and things that could sell for a lot more money. So the pool pottery was catering for the more wealthy people, and as the wealth of the country grew, they wanted the finer things. So people that would normally eat off an earthenware plate were saying, I actually would quite like a china plate now, please. And that was really the beginning. It was a sort of fashion thing, but it was also that the pool pottery became cheaper as well, and that sort of pottery grew and forced out the Verwood.